Scientists found a man whose brain works so differently that he can remember every single day of his life in perfect detail. But when they looked closer, they discovered something terrifying about what happens when your memory is too good. This is the true story of how the human brain's greatest strength became one man's living nightmare, and what it reveals about why your forgetful brain might actually be saving your life. In 1968, a team of neurologists at the University of California received a letter that would change everything we thought we knew about human memory. The letter was from a man claiming he could remember every moment of his life, not just the big stuff, but everything. What he ate for breakfast on a random Tuesday in 1952, the exact conversation he had with a stranger at a bus stop in 1960, the weather on any given day from his entire childhood. Most people would throw that letter in the trash. Sounds like someone looking for attention, right? But one researcher, a neurologist named James McGaugh, decided to investigate. And what he found was that this wasn't just some guy with a good memory trick. This was something science had never seen before. The man's name was Solomon Shereshevsky, though most researchers just called him S to protect his identity. And his brain was doing something that, according to everything we knew about neuroscience, should have been impossible. Let me explain what normal memory looks like first, because you need to understand this to grasp just how different S's brain really was. When you and I experience something, our brain doesn't record it like a video camera. Instead, it breaks the experience into pieces. The visual information goes to one area, the sounds to another, the emotions to another part. Then when you try to remember that event later, your brain reconstructs it from these scattered pieces. And every time you remember something, you're actually changing it slightly, adding new details, removing others, reshaping it based on what you know now. This is why two people can remember the same event completely differently. This is why your childhood memories feel fuzzy. This is why you can't remember what you had for lunch 2 weeks ago. Your brain is constantly deciding what's worth keeping and what can be deleted to make room for new information. But S's brain didn't work like that at all. When McGaugh started testing S, he began with simple experiments. He'd read him a list of random words and asked him to repeat them back. S could do it perfectly. Okay, that's impressive but not impossible. Some people have good short-term memory. Then McGaugh waited a week and asked S to recall that same list. S repeated it back perfectly, every single word in the exact order. Then McGaugh waited a month. Same result, perfect recall. Then he waited a year, still perfect. But here's where it gets really strange. McGaugh didn't just ask Ser to remember the words. He asked him to describe the experience of receiving the list. And S could tell him everything. What McGaugh was wearing that day, the expression on his face when he read each word, the temperature in the room, the sound of traffic outside the window, even the intrusive thoughts Sarah was having while listening to the list. McGaugh realized he wasn't just dealing with good memory. He was dealing with a brain that couldn't forget anything. Over the next several years, researchers put S through hundreds of tests. They'd give him massive strings of numbers, sometimes over 100 digits long, and he'd memorize them in minutes. They'd give him complex mathematical formulas he didn't understand, and he'd repeat them back perfectly. They'd show him pages of random symbols, and years later he could draw them from memory. But the researchers started noticing something else, something that made them uncomfortable. S wasn't happy. In fact, he seemed tormented. During one testing session, S broke down and told the researchers what it was actually like inside his head, and what he described was absolutely horrifying. S didn't just have a good memory. He had a condition called synesthesia, where his senses were completely crossed. When he heard a sound, he would see colors. When he saw numbers, he would taste flavors. When someone spoke to him, every single word created a cascade of sensory experiences that would overwhelm his entire consciousness. Imagine trying to have a normal conversation, but every word the person says explodes into colors, tastes, textures, and sounds in your mind. You're not just hearing them speak. You're experiencing every word as a full sensory event. S described trying to read a book. For you and me, reading is pretty straightforward. We see words, we understand their meaning, we move on. But for Seth, every single word on the page created vivid images, sensations, and associations. A simple sentence could take him 30 minutes to process, because his brain was drowning in sensory information. The word red wasn't just a color, it was a taste, a feeling, a sound, a complete experience. The number 7 wasn't just a digit. It was a man with a mustache. Always. That's just what 7 looked like to him. And because he couldn't forget anything, all of these sensory experiences piled up on top of each other. Reading a single page meant processing thousands of overwhelming sensations, and they would all stay with him forever. But the memory itself was even more problematic than the synesthesia. Think about your worst memory. Maybe it's an embarrassing moment from high school. Maybe it's a painful breakup. Maybe it's the loss of someone you loved. Now think about how that memory has changed over time. It probably hurts less now than it did when it happened, right? The edges have softened. Some details have faded. Time has made it more bearable. A fight with his wife from 10 years ago felt exactly the same as a fight from yesterday. The embarrassment of making a mistake as a child was just as intense when he was 40 years old. He couldn't heal. He couldn't move on. He was trapped in every moment of his life simultaneously. And it got worse. Sals had tried to make a career out of his ability. He became a stage performer, doing memory demonstrations for audiences. People would test him, giving him long lists of information to memorize, and he'd repeat it all back perfectly. He was famous for it. People called him a genius. But standing on that stage created new memories. The pressure, the anxiety, the fear of failure. And those memories never faded. Every time he performed, he was also reliving every previous performance. The weight of all those experiences crushed him. Researchers discovered something else about S's brain that explained what was happening. Using early brain imaging technology, they found that his hippocampus, the part of the brain responsible for forming and organizing memories, was working overtime. But more importantly, his brain wasn't doing something that normal brains do automatically. Normal brains have a process called synaptic pruning. Basically, your brain constantly deletes connections between neurons that aren't important. It's like cleaning out your closet and throwing away clothes you don't wear anymore. This pruning is essential for cognitive function. It keeps your brain efficient and focused on what matters. His brain wasn't pruning anything. Every connection, every memory, every experience was being permanently stored with perfect clarity. His brain was like a hoarder's house, stuffed with so much information that he couldn't find anything useful anymore. And this led to a devastating problem that researchers didn't fully understand at first. Is couldn't think abstractly. When you and I read a story, we extract meaning from it. We understand themes and concepts. We can summarize and interpret, but he's got stuck in the details. He'd remember every single word perfectly, but couldn't tell you what the story was actually about. The sensory experiences of reading each word drowned out his ability to see the bigger picture. When someone told him a metaphor, he couldn't understand it. If you said time flies, his brain would create an image of time with wings, flying through the air. He couldn't grasp that it was just an expression meaning time passes quickly. Every word was literal to him. This meant that despite having perfect memory, he struggled to function in normal life. He couldn't hold down a regular job because following instructions was too difficult. The words people used would create such intense sensory experiences that he'd lose track of what they were actually asking him to do. He couldn't maintain relationships because he remembered every tiny slight, every small disagreement, with perfect clarity. And because he experienced them as if they were still happening, he couldn't forgive or forget. He was constantly drowning in accumulated resentment and pain. His marriage fell apart, not because he didn't love his wife, but because living with someone who remembers every fight, every harsh word, every moment of frustration with perfect clarity made it impossible to move forward. His wife would try to let things go, but us couldn't. He was still living in every argument they'd ever had. McGough and his team realized they were documenting something tragic. They'd found a man with superhuman memory, but that memory was destroying his life. And this is where the story reveals something crucial about how our brains actually work and why forgetting is not a failure of our biology, but one of its most important features. See, there's a famous curve in neuroscience called the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. A German psychologist named Hermann Ebbinghaus discovered that humans forget about half of new information within an hour and about 90% within a week. For years, people thought this was a design flaw. We needed to fight against forgetting, strengthen our memories, hold on to more information. But studying cases like S revealed the truth. We're not supposed to remember everything. Forgetting is a feature, not a bug.
Your brain is constantly making decisions about what information is worth keeping and what can be discarded. This isn't because your brain is weak or lazy. It's because holding on to everything would make it impossible to function. Think about it. When you go to the grocery store, you need to remember what you came to buy. You don't need to remember what every other person in the store was wearing, every song that played over the speakers, every word on every sign you passed. Your brain filters out the noise and focuses on what matters. Couldn't filter anything out. Everything was signal.
Nothing was noise, and it paralyzed him. Researchers also discovered another crucial function of forgetting. It's not just about clearing space in your brain. It's about emotional regulation and psychological health. When something bad happens to you, the memory is initially very strong and very painful. But over time, your brain naturally weakens that memory. The emotional intensity fades, the details blur. This process allows you to heal, to learn from the experience without being traumatized by it forever. Couldn't heal. Every traumatic experience stayed with him at full intensity. He was suffering from what we'd now recognize as a severe form of PTSD, except it wasn't triggered by a single event. It was triggered by his entire life. McGaw's research on S helped spark a revolution in how we understand memory. Scientists started realizing that the goal shouldn't be to remember more. The goal should be to remember the right things. Your brain is incredibly smart about this. It strengthens memories that are repeated or emotionally significant. If you hear a fact once and never think about it again, your brain lets it fade. But if you review that fact multiple times, or if it's connected to a strong emotion, your brain decides it's worth keeping. This is why you remember your wedding day, but not what you ate for lunch on some random Tuesday 3 years ago. This is why you remember the lyrics to songs you heard in high school but can't remember the name of someone you met 5 minutes ago. Your brain is constantly judging what deserves space and what doesn't. And this is also why trauma is so damaging. Traumatic memories come with such intense emotions that your brain marks them as critically important. They get strengthened and preserved, even when you desperately want to forget them. It's a system that usually works brilliantly, but can backfire in extreme situations. Hart's case taught researchers that memory isn't just about storage capacity, it's about organization, prioritization, and the ability to let go. Modern neuroscience has found a few other cases similar to S. They call the condition hyperthymesia, or highly superior autobiographical memory. There are only about 60 confirmed cases in the world, and almost all of them report the same thing. It's not a gift, it's a burden. One woman with hyperthymesia described it like this: "People think they want to remember everything, but they have no idea what that actually means. I remember every day I've lived like it was yesterday. That sounds cool until you realize it means I'm living every bad day over and over again. The grief never fades. The embarrassment never goes away. The pain never heals." Another person with the condition said they'd give anything to forget, just for one day. They wanted to experience what it's like to not carry the weight of their entire life in perfect detail. But here's what's fascinating. These people don't have better memories than you in all ways. They can remember their personal experiences in incredible detail, but they're often not any better at memorizing new information than normal people. They're not walking encyclopedias. They just can't forget their own lives. This suggests that their brains have lost the ability to do what's called memory consolidation. Normal brains take experiences, and over time extract the important information while discarding the irrelevant details. You remember the meaning of an event without remembering every sensory detail, but people with hyperthymesia seem to skip this process. They remember everything about their personal experiences, including all the irrelevant details, and those memories never fade or change. Researchers have also studied the opposite end of the spectrum, people who forget almost everything. There are rare cases of people with severe amnesia who can't form new long-term memories at all. And while that's obviously devastating in its own way, these studies reveal something interesting. People with amnesia often report being happier than you'd expect. Without the weight of accumulated regrets, resentments, and painful memories, they live entirely in the present moment. Every day is new, every experience is fresh. They can't learn from the past, which is a huge problem, but they also aren't haunted by it. This isn't to say amnesia is good. It's terrible, but it shows that there's a balance. Too much memory is torture. Too little memory makes it impossible to function. Somewhere in the middle is where humans are supposed to be, and that's exactly where you are. Your forgetful, imperfect, frustrating memory is actually working exactly as intended. The last documented research on him was in the 1980s. By that point, he'd stopped performing. He'd withdrawn from public life almost entirely. The constant accumulation of memories had become too much to bear. He spent most of his time alone, trying to manage the overwhelming flood of information in his head. He developed elaborate systems to try to organize his memories, to file them away so they wouldn't all scream at him at once. He'd visualize placing memories in different locations in his mind, like organizing books on shelves. But it never really worked. The memories were always there, always accessible, always vivid. McGaw's last interview with Seth was heartbreaking. Seth told him that he'd spent his whole life being treated as special, as gifted, as superhuman, but he'd never felt more alone. Nobody understood what it was like to live in his head. Nobody could relate to his experience, and he wouldn't wish it on anyone. When McGaw's asked him if he had any advice for people who wanted to improve their memory, said something that stuck with the researcher for the rest of his life. He said, "Tell them to be grateful they can forget. Tell them their memory is already perfect because it lets them be human." That's the real lesson here. Your memory isn't failing you when you forget where you put your keys or can't remember someone's name. It's protecting you. It's filtering out the noise so you can focus on what matters. It's letting painful memories fade so you can heal. It's giving you the ability to change and grow without being chained to every version of yourself you've ever been. The human brain is the most complex structure we know of in the universe. It has roughly 86 billion neurons, each making thousands of connections. The potential storage capacity is almost limitless. But your brain doesn't use all that capacity for memory, because that's not what memory is for. Memory is for learning from the past and planning for the future. It's not for perfectly recording every moment. That would be a waste of resources and would actually make you less capable, not more. This is why people who try to become memory champions have to use elaborate tricks and techniques. They create vivid, bizarre mental images and story chains to force their brains to remember things they'd normally forget. And even then, they're only improving their ability to memorize specific types of information. They're not changing their fundamental memory system, they're working around it. And after competitions, many memory champions report that the techniques are exhausting and not useful in daily life. They can memorize the order of a shuffled deck of cards, but they still forget their anniversary or where they parked their car, because their brains are doing what brains are supposed to do: filtering, organizing, and letting go of what's not important. So the next time you forget something, don't beat yourself up. Don't feel stupid or inadequate. Instead, recognize that your brain is doing exactly what millions of years of evolution designed it to do. You're not broken. You're not flawed. You're human. And being human means forgetting. It means healing. It means moving forward. It means not being trapped in every moment you've ever lived. You would have given anything to have what you take for granted every single day: the ability to forget, the mercy of fading memories, the freedom to let go. Your imperfect memory is protecting you from the nightmare of perfect recall. Hit subscribe for more brain science that'll change how you see yourself.